Hi readers, Chris here. Today I'm coming at you to talk about The Lightning Thief, the first book in the Percy Jackson and the Olympians series. Before I jump in really quick, I want to know from you, if you could be so kind as to leave a comment, if you want me to review all the books in this series. Last year, my middle grade fantasy of the year was Artemis Fowl. I reviewed the first one and then I kind of didn't really review any of the rest except during my wrap-ups. So I want to know if you want me to review all of these books or just kind of talk about them when I do my wrap-ups. If you could let me know in the comments section below, that would be appreciated. Now I'm going to jump into my non-spoiler review of The Lightning Thief. If you are not familiar with this series at all, our basic setup is that we have a young boy. His name is Percy. He suffers from ADHD, dyslexia. He's been kicked out of all these schools. He has a really hard time staying in school because he can't make the grades, can't make friends, etc., etc., etc. And then all of a sudden, one day, all these mythological creatures start appearing to him. So if you know anything about Greek mythology at all, like these characters are going to show up. Everyone from, the big Olympic gods like Zeus, Athena, Ares, Poseidon, to mythological creatures like minotaurs, naiads, satyrs, like anything you could possibly think of, it's in here. Shenanigans ensue, and basically throughout the course of the story, Percy gets roped into this quest where he is tasked with finding Zeus's thunderbolt, so his big master thunderbolt. He has to return it within a certain amount of time or else this war is going to break out because Zeus thinks that one of his brothers stole the thunderbolt, but Hades thinks that someone else stole it, and no one knows who stole the thunderbolt and why, and it's going to set off this big war. So that's kind of the real basic setup of this book. So that brings me, first thing I want to talk about is the world building. Now, I've always been like a mild fan of Greek mythology, so there are references to things in here that even I didn't know about. I only have a very base knowledge of it, but if you are someone that is like really into Greek mythology, like you're obsessed with it, you are gonna love this book because there's basically, once Percy accepts his quest, him and his friends basically go on a road trip across America. So he kind of starts out in New York and ends up in LA on the West Coast. So they travel through America, and everywhere they stop, there's like different creatures from mythology that they run into. So there's like a Medusa at one point, and like a bunch of other ones. I think the Fates. Like, there's all these different creatures and all these different things that they experience, which some of them I actually had to go look up because I was not familiar with it. So, first of all, any book that can teach me something I think is really fascinating. That's really kind of the only thing I can say about world building without giving too much away. But the one other thing I want to talk about is that I think it's really fascinating the way this book sets up the world and how the mythological creatures interact with the human world. What I mean by that is that if I had read this book as a 12-year-old, like it's kind of intended, then I would just accept the fact that, hey, all these mythological creatures exist and that we humans, we see what we want to see, so that's why most humans don't see these creatures all over the place. But reading it as an adult, never having read this book before, when they say things like that, like humans only see what they want to see, it could just be me reading too much into that, but like it really led me down this rabbit hole of thinking about how people only see what they want to see. For example, there's this scene with a priest. They notice a priest, and Percy is kind of wondering, what is this priest seeing? Because this priest, i.e. Catholic priest, does not believe in Greek mythology, but Percy is seeing it, so what is this priest seeing? And his friend makes an offhanded comment like, oh, he's just seeing what he wants to see. But that really got my brain thinking, and even after finishing this book still thinking about it. And again, might be reading way too much into this, but I thought that was a really fascinating question, and that's all I'm going to say about that. So I'm going to repeat this again at the end, but I feel like I can totally understand why so many people love this book in this series, because you can take whatever you want to take out of it. You can take it at face value, you can take the simple version, but there are some philosophical questions that are asked in here if you're looking for them. Next, we're going to move on to our characters, and of course, our main character here is Percy. Now, when I first met Percy in the beginning of the book, I thought it was interesting that they made such a point of pointing out his ADHD and his dyslexia. And at first, I was like, I don't understand the point of mentioning that unless it's relevant later on in the story. Well, let me tell you, it is relevant later on in the story. And it's relevant in such an interesting way. So I think it's really, really, really cool and really interesting that you have a character, a young boy, who kind of suffers from things that a lot of young kids suffer from. I think that makes his character super relatable. And again, I've said this already, like not that long ago, I can see why so many people love this story. Whether it's his dyslexia, his ADHD, like there is something that prevents him from making friends like a lot of people struggle with, especially in that like 12-year-old, like the awkward years, if you will. Like he's a super relatable character. So when you find out what happens to him, it makes it really easy to cheer for him later on when he goes on his quest. So I really liked Percy. And then his whole setup with he has a mother, he's being raised by a single mother and an abusive stepfather, which on the surface, again, seems like a really horrible situation. But when you find out why, like, things are the way they are, again, it just it gives you a lot to think about. In the interest of time, that's all I'm going to say about Percy. And I also want to talk really quick about his two friends that he meets in his quest, who are Annabeth and Grover. Now, Annabeth and Grover, again, Percy kind of meets them. They come into his life in a whirlwind, and I think that the three of them together make like a really great team. They really kind of remind me of like Harry Potter, Ron, and Hermione, like the golden trio, if they will. Like they really remind me of that, because Grover, like Ron, is kind of a more like kind of nerdy guy type thing, whereas Annabeth, she's like the smart one. She knows all the things. So I really, really, really liked their characters, and I really, really, really liked their dynamic. It's really hard to talk about any of the other characters without giving things away because of all the mythology and all the things that happen. So all I will say is that all of the mythology creatures that we meet, because like I said earlier, like we meet so many of them, unfortunately, a lot of them we don't get to know that well. Some of them we do, absolutely, but there's a bunch of other ones that I would have liked to gotten to know better. So that would be my only like really, really minuscule complaint about this book, is that there's way too much mythology and we don't get enough time to let some of it actually sink in and absorb before like kind of jumping on to the next thing. So that brings me to the plot of the book. And like I said in the beginning, we have Percy. He goes on this quest. I was really surprised. I had no idea that this book kind of turns into like a road trip type story. I was not expecting that. I thought that was a really cool way to like bring this story to life. It's like basically teenagers, young kids, mythology road trip. I mean, doesn't that just sound like a cool story? I mean, totally awesome. I can't wait to find out what happens in book 2. But let me just say, the plot of this book moves at such a fast pace. Pretty much from the first chapter, things start happening, and they don't stop happening till the end, which makes this book super easy to read because it's just one thing after another after another. And again, like I said about in the character section, It is a small complaint that nothing gets to like sit for a while, but things happen so quickly. They just keep going. The action never slows down. It makes this book super easy to read and super exciting to read. So again, just another reason why I can see why these books are so popular. Super entertaining, super action-packed. Which is why I believe that they're working on a new TV series or movie, I believe. I know they already did one back years ago, which I know was not that great. So hopefully whatever new iteration they're working on will be a little bit more exciting. That is all I'm going to say today about The Lightning Thief. I really enjoyed this book. Even though it's meant for younger readers, I got so much out of it. I would recommend it for readers of all ages. If you're a fan of fantasy, if you're a fan of mythology, if you're a fan of, kids going on road trips, if you're a fan of any of that stuff, I would definitely recommend giving this one a try, especially before any new movies or TV shows come out. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not already, please subscribe to my channel. I do new videos every Wednesday, Friday, and sometimes on Sundays. All right, everyone, happy reading.